you can get started with plain text editing right away without installing anything. Go to Applications and find TextEdit. Now you want to either drag this into your dock or make a shortcut on your desktop so that you can use it and get to it easily in the future. So the problem with TextEdit is that when you start it up, the first thing that it gives you is a rich text document. Now I can do things like I can change the font, and I can change some of the formatting, I can change font sizes, I can give this italic. This is rich text, clearly, and we can tell that even more clearly when we save it. I'm going to save it in this Webmaking 101 folder on my desktop. It's giving us this file format, and there's a couple of options here: rich text, Microsoft Word, and stuff like that. And I'm going to save it as rich text. Note, by the way, that this is normally checked, hide extension, and all that does is it shows you the extension or not. You want to be aware of what the extension is. So I usually leave this unchecked. Right now it's saving as .rtf, which stands for rich text format, which just is the format for this rich text document. Save that, you'll see it shows up right here. Untitled.rtf. Now you may have actually seen, let me duplicate this real quick. You may have seen an option in there as I save this to save it as a web page, a .html file. And now this is where it gets really confusing, because what we want to do is we want to write HTML, but saving it in HTML format is not the same as being able to edit the HTML. This, if we do this, this is a copy of Untitled. Again, the extension is not hidden, but it saves it with .html. It is saving it in HTML format. You see it showed up down here. But look at this, it's still rich text. It's still editing it as rich text. It's not editing the actual code that's behind it. I'll show you how to see the code that this generates in a minute. But I'm going to make another duplicate. And now let's actually make this plain text the way we need it to be. The quick and dirty way is to go to Format and go to Make Plain Text. This will ask you if you want to go ahead because you're going to lose formatting. You do want to lose formatting. There, now this is no longer rich text, it's plain text. And I can do some HTML in here. For example, let's put a bold tag. Don't worry about this yet. You'll learn HTML in a bit. But for now, just know that this makes this bold. Now I'm going to save this as in the folder again. I'm going to call this web page because it's a web page now, and it'll default to .txt. You want that. That's coming from this right here. But I'm going to give it the extension .html because this is actually HTML. And note that now that this is plain text, it doesn't have a formatting option down here anymore. It has an encoding option instead. So encoding has to do with the character type. Don't mess with this. Just leave it alone. Whatever it defaults to is fine. But you don't have any options to choose the formatting anymore because there is no formatting. Or you might think of it as plain text formatting. But what it means is that it's just saving it without formatting. So go ahead and save. And it's going to warn you that you're saving as a weird format, a weird extension rather. And you're doing that on purpose. Save it as HTML. And you'll see it showed up down here. Put this so we can see all three of them. Now, the problem with what I just did is that if I were to open a new file in TextEdit, it's going to open it with rich text editing again, because I just did it one at a time with Format, Make Plain Text. So let's not do that. We need to go into TextEdit and change it so that it will always open it as plain text. Under Preferences, under Format, go from rich text to plain text. You want it to always default to plain text. So this is good. But let me show you something else that's crazy. If you just leave it at that, you're going to have a lot of confusing problems. Okay, so these are all saved. I'm closing them. What do you think is going to happen now that I told it to default to plain text? So here's this HTML file that I made, and here's the one that it made. So I wrote the HTML for this one. TextEdit wrote the HTML for this one. what if we want to edit the HTML that was made by TextEdit? Let's open this with TextEdit, and we should be able to see the HTML you'd expect. But what happens is it opens in a rich text format again. Why does it do this? Well, it's because you created it in TextEdit with a rich text format, and it's opening it that way again. And what you need to do is you need to go into Preferences, go to this second part here, Open and Save. Now what these two options do is these tell it to open things as plain text instead of formatted text. So this one, display HTML files as HTML code instead of formatted text. That means basically open HTML files that have the HTML extension, as plain text instead of formatted. This means open RTF files as plain text instead of formatted. You don't have to check this one, but definitely check this one. Display HTML files as HTML code instead of formatted text. So what that's going to do, you can ignore all this other stuff really, is now when I open this file, it's going to allow me to open it it's going to default to plain text, and I'll be able to see the code. So this is the code that TextEdit used to make that rich text document. It's actually HTML. It's in HTML format. And because I checked the other one, we can look at the code. We can look at the code that TextEdit does for rich text as well. It's not the same as HTML. It's its own rich text weird format. You see it says this is rich text. Same thing here. And now this is going to make it a lot easier when we're opening our own files that we've actually edited in HTML. This is plain text.